As big-name pharaohs go, Tutankhamun is probably one of the greats, but you wouldn't necessarily have thought so in the aftermath of his reign. He was part of two historical eras, actually, and one of them was 3,000 years after his death. This is because the discovery of his tomb 100 years ago sparked massive public interest in Egyptology, which had been waning in the decades prior. But enough about that for now, we'll talk about his tomb and its discovery another time. Let's talk about the boy king himself. Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten and a lesser wife. We know where this wife is. Or rather, we have a mummy confirmed through genetic testing to be Tutankhamun's mother, but we don't have 100% certainty on her identity. Most likely it was not Nefertiti, because Nefertiti, unlike this mummy, was not a blood relative of Akhenaten. And we know that the mother and father of Tutankhamun were genetically related. Now, DNA gets hard to analyse over time, and there is room for interpretation. The younger lady, as Tutankhamun's biological mother is known, was either a sister or daughter of Akhenaten, more likely sister. I've seen proposed genealogies that have him as the son of Akhenaten and Akhenaten's daughter Meritaten.
But your brother will become your father-in-law, that much is beyond dispute.
Either way, the close relationship between Tutankhamun's parents is the ultimate explanation for both his short life and the reason that his health was never destined to be in full bloom. We call him the Boy King because he was 8 or 9 when he acceded to the throne, but also because he was, by modern standards, only just an adult when he died. The boy who became King Nebkheperera was born Tutankhaten. Translating this name is surprisingly controversial, but conventionally we say living image of the Aten. Not long into his reign, he mirrored his own father by changing his personal name to Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun. Yes, Amun was back. Tutankhamun rolled back the religious and political changes made during the Amarna period, including relocating the capital to Thebes and re-establishing its Amun temple there. He even went so far as to countermand his father's will and move Akhenaten's mummy from the mountains of Amarna to the Valley of Kings. I say Tutankhamun did these things, in reality his government did. His chief advisor, and unofficial regent possibly, was his step-grandfather, that is Nefertiti's father, Ai. His official capacity was High Priest of Ptah, but he was far more influential than this title would imply. More on him later. Worship of Aten was not simply joined by renewed cults in honour of the old gods, it was actively quashed, and the Aten returned to the status of simply being the physical manifestation of Ra, the sun disk. In the so-called Restoration Stela, Tutankhamun is portrayed as coming at the hour the gods needed him most.
Now, when his majesty arose as king, the temples of the gods and goddesses from Abu to the lagoons of the delta had fallen into ruin. Their shrines had fallen into decay and had become overgrown with plants. Their sanctuaries were as if they had never existed. Their temples were footpaths. The land was in distress, and the gods were turning away from it.
Tutankhamun endowed the cults with riches once more. Perhaps he felt that this was his last chance to gain the favour of the gods over his failing dynasty. You see, Tutankhamun married his half-sister, Ankhesenpaaten, later Ankhesenamun, though they were not successful in furthering the dynasty. Tutankhamun, well aware that he was unlikely to sire a litter of descendants, had named an heir, the dashing young general Horemhab. But Horemhab may not have been in Egypt, or at least anywhere near the seat of power, when the Boy King died, because he was not the next man to be crowned pharaoh. Speaking of the Boy King's death, it wasn't very scandalous. It looks like he died of complications after a fall. Falling was probably a fairly common thing for Tutankhamun. We know from the way he was depicted in his tomb that he walked with a cane, and we know from analysis of his mummy that he had very weak legs, so it would have been difficult for him to get around without being carried a lot of the time. But there is some evidence that he might have died of a more ongoing condition. Sickle cell anemia has been strongly proposed. Either way, his succession was muddied. It's rare in the history of monarchy that a throne should pass up the generations instead of down, and rarer still that it should move up twice, but the honour fell to none other than the High Priest of Ptah, Tutankhamun's step-grandfather, Ai, who performed Tutankhamun's funeral with one breath and named himself pharaoh with the next. And I had ambitions beyond himself. Had things gone a little differently, I wouldn't have been one of the last pharaohs of the 18th dynasty. He would have been the first pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. And next week, we'll look at yet another pharaoh that we can truly call this fucking guy. Wonderful of you to show up yet again. Who knew this relatively obscure pharaoh would garner so much interest? Bizarre. Don't forget to high-five the like and subscribe buttons on your way elsewhere. The advisors surrounding my coffin wondering which of them will declare themselves my successor are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt, and screw you all, I'm taking this dynasty down with me. Until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity, and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.